Coming at you live, coming at you live. This is your boy Skillz. This is Skillz on Sports. It's been a minute, but I'm here tonight. We got plenty to talk about. I want to give you a little bit of insight on how I do this show. I usually spend several hours before each Skillz on Sports show, and even as well as my trio show, also known as the Season Over Fire Everyone Sports Show. I usually spend hours doing tedious show prep, so I have every last number, stat, fact, injury update, everything that I keep up with this stuff anyway, but if I'm going to be quote unquote on the air, I want to make sure that I don't give you anything that is not accurate, and I want to make sure I give you as much useless and useful information as your minds can handle. Tonight, though, we're going to do things a little bit differently because there's a lot of topics. There's a lot of topical stuff going on in the world of sports, and I want to be sure that you know not to expect hard-hitting, strategical, deep insight that you might get on other channels. You're not going to get that here. You're going to get me running my mouth on different sports topics from the world of baseball, football, and basketball. There is no shortage of it right now, on and off the court, on and off the field. We're going to even get into a little baseball stuff. But don't worry, I have a little insight on what's going on the field, all the regular stuff I usually talk about as far as play, standings, all that sort of things. And, we're based here in the San Francisco Bay Area, just outside of San Francisco Bay, about 30 minutes away. So the teams I follow are the Giants, the Warriors, and, of course, the San Francisco 49ers. Those are my teams. Those are my preferred teams, my teams of choice, if you would. But I also follow national sports. I follow the whole leagues, Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA. I follow the whole leagues thoroughly. So we're not going to just focus on the Bay Area. There'll be a slight lean towards my Bay Area teams, but it'll only be slight. We're going to get into everybody, even the San Antonio Spurs. And God bless them. Hey, you guys remember that time the San Antonio Spurs won 5 titles in 14 years? Do you? Yeah, it doesn't seem very, very recent. It seems like a couple of lifetimes ago. This team has just been. Well, when you're successful for as long as a franchise like the San Antonio Spurs were. Remember, they got Tim Duncan in the '97 draft after essentially tanking the year before. Once David Robinson broke his foot. Let me take you back to the '90s. Here's how it was. The Spurs were one of those teams that knocked on the door of championship contention, but the door never really fully opened because teams like the Utah Jazz were better. Teams like, of course, the Houston Rockets for a time were better. Phoenix Suns had their run when they got Barkley. So the Spurs were never really able, the '90s Spurs that is, to get over that hump. And they had good players. David Robinson, the Admiral, of course, was the superstar. He was young back then. He could do all kinds of things. He was the driving force behind that Spurs team that made the playoffs. I want to say they made the playoffs every year of the first 6 or 7 years of Robinson's career. This is one of those things I would have looked up if I did show prep today, which I did not. But I can tell you that he had a good supporting cast, guys like Willie Anderson, Sean Elliott. But when he went down in early in the '96-'97 season with a broken foot, the Spurs went to pieces. And I remember they had this real long losing streak. I think at one point they were like, I want to say something like 4-20. It was bad. Bob Hill lost his job, even though he had really no control over anything that was going on right there. Well, Shaq said in his book that nobody liked Bob Hill, so that could have helped matters. Greg Popovich, who was in the front office at the time, came. Yes, he's been coached that long. If you didn't know, he's been head coach of the Spurs that long. He came down from the front office to take over as head coach. Finished out that season without Robinson, and other guys eventually got hurt. Was that the year that Sean Elliott had? No, Sean Elliott had his kidney issue, I think, a couple years later. But in any event, the Spurs finished 20-62 that season. And that summer, everyone knew Tim Duncan out of Wake Forest was going to go first in the draft. It was just a matter of who was going to get him. And once the Spurs decided they were just not even going to make any serious effort, and I want to say, I'm not sure, and I hate to say something I'm not positive about, but I want to say that towards the end of that season, Robinson was ready to come back from the broken foot, and they didn't play him so that they could secure that number 1 pick. I have a vague memory of reading something like that. I do not know if that's true, and obviously I did not work for the Spurs at the time, so I can't verify whether or not this is true. But what I can tell you is that they did end up getting Tim Duncan. They slid him down to power forward, 7-footer at power forward, 7-footer at center and Robinson when he was back healthy. That 97-98 season, they became a force one more time. By the end of the next season, which was the lockout season, 99, they were champions in the 50-game season. So a lot of people didn't really acknowledge it, so to speak, because they beat the Knicks, who were down Patrick Ewing that year, and didn't have really any other real 7-footers except for Herb Williams, who was about 110 years old at the time, to contend with the twin towers of Robinson and Duncan. Marcus Camby gave it his all, but the Knicks were just too small to beat the Spurs in the finals that year, and San Antonio was on its way to a 15-year run where they would end up going to the finals 6 times, winning 5 of them, and coming within a rebound of possibly winning all 6. They won the title in 2003, beating the New Jersey Nets. They won in 2005, knocking off the Detroit Pistons, who had won the year before. They won again in 2007. And that was over, let me think for a second here. That was one over Cleveland. That was LeBron's first final, yeah. And San Antonio took that series. Got to the finals again after there was a lull. The Lakers kind of rose up at the end of that decade. So the Spurs took a backseat. They were still winning. They were still making deep playoff runs. Don't get me wrong. But they didn't go back to the finals again until 2014. Pop was still there, running things. Tim Duncan was still there playing ball, though he wasn't playing as much and he wasn't as dominant. He was still there. By then, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili had joined the fray. Danny Green, Kawhi Leonard were there. They, as you recall, came so close to beating Miami Heat in the Game 6 of the 2014 finals until that rebound got away and Ray Allen got the pass from Chris Bosh and sank the game-winning 3. Miami won Game 7, and the Spurs, as the famous Greg Papa, not to be confused with Greg Popovich, Greg Papa, local Bay Area broadcasting legend, and yes, the voice of the San Francisco 49ers, he always described it as the Spurs systematically dissecting the Heat in the I said 2014 before this. 2013 that they lost to the Heat. 2014 was the year that they recovered and beat the Heat in the NBA Finals, and I believe that was 4-1. That was the year that LeBron got cramped up in Game 1 due to the heat. Something was wrong with the arena heat in San Antonio, or the air conditioning in San Antonio. The Spurs really didn't have much problem with it. I remember it was beautiful. I wrote a blog about how easily, I won't say easily, but how beautifully and how mechanically, how artistically the Spurs passing and cutting and everything on offense was. The Heat, who were a great defensive team pretty much, guys like LeBron and Bosh and other guys. Chalmers wasn't a bad defender, as I recall. And they just did not have much of a chance of stopping San Antonio. They went into that season on a mission. They wanted to avenge what they felt was a not deserved loss in the 2013 finals. They probably should have won that finals. Ray Allen hit that 3 because Tim Duncan was on the floor to get the rebound. And Chris Bosh got it and knocked it out to Allen, and Allen sank that 3 from the right corner, and the Spurs took it personally. Popovich and the Spurs took that loss to heart, and that's what you do. And I think Bill Simmons described it in his book. Well, it wouldn't have been Bill Simmons. His book came out way before that even happened. But I'll just say this: you can either when you suffer a gut-wrenching defeat like that, there's 2 ways you can recover from it. You curl up. You don't ever let your heart get broken like that again, and you leave the dating world, quote unquote. Just to use an example, you leave the dating world. Don't ever let your heart get hurt like that again, because it's too painful. Or you harden that heart up, you toughen up, you work out, you get in the best shape you could ever imagine yourself being in. Go in there with both guns blazing, and you take apart that opponent that broke your heart the year before, and that's exactly what San Antonio did. If I'm the Heat, hey, I don't even count that as a loss, because nobody was going to beat the Spurs the way they played that year. Popovich was coaching he took that loss personally. You could see it in his eyes. I can still see the way he's always pretty intense with his players, but it was a different level this year, this finals. They wanted it. They just simply wanted it more. And when you want it more, you're gonna get it. And the Spurs got it, and they got it good from the Heat that year. And I have to tell you, as a Miami Heat disliker at the time, I was not a fan of the decision. I was not a fan of LeBron or even Wade at the time. I did not like the Heat. I hated their PA announcer. Ooh. And I can't say I've ever had any feelings for a PA announcer, good or bad, in my sporting life, except for the Miami Heat announcer during those years when they were going to the finals 4 years in a row. And I could still hear him to this day. Anytime somebody hit a three, sounded like a plane taking off. And it was, well, they did play at an arena named after an airline at the time. So I'm getting off track here. Point is, I didn't like the Heat. I was happy to see the Spurs win. Spurs deserved to win that 14th series. But the problem is, when you put all your chips in for that long, and you ride your superstar Tim Duncan, you ride him for the better part of 20 years, and you ride Ginobili for 17 years, you ride Parker for, what was he there for 15, 16 years until he went to Charlotte and then retired. And your veterans like Danny Green. Now, mind you, the Spurs I got to give them credit. They set themselves up well, whether it was intentional or not, to still be productive and still contend and compete into the following decade. All right, the Spurs were still supposed to be contenders into the 2020s because of Leonard. Leonard was supposed to still be there. There was a superstar waiting in place to take over for the Spurs once Tim Duncan got old, which he finally retired after the 2016 season. Kawhi Leonard was there. Kawhi Leonard was in place. Kawhi Leonard already had the championship from 2014. He was similar to Duncan in many ways in terms of he didn't say a whole lot, kept it all pretty close to the vest. You never really knew what he was thinking or feeling. The thumbnail for this says I'm going to be eating and drinking, but I'm just going to be drinking. I ate all the food, and I didn't eat all the food. It's just that, when you have Thanksgiving dinner, you only have so much time before it's going to start tasting like monkey feet. That first day of Thanksgiving, or Thanksgiving itself, I should say, the food is delectable. Only the worst of the worst could screw it up. And the turkey, the stuffing, the cranberry, it's all just delectable. And I had dinner with my family yesterday. It was great. The food, I still taste it. And then today, we came back home, made another dinner for ourselves, and yeah, that was just as good, if not better. The problem is, you get a little Thanksgiving heavy by the Friday, the day after the Thanksgiving. The first day of leftovers, that Friday after, you're doing all right. They're still going to be fresh. The gravy's still moist. The turkey's still pretty much moist. The cranberry sauce still tastes like cranberry sauce. Everything is still as it should be. But by Saturday, it starts to lose it. It starts to lose it little by little. If you still have food left over Saturday, you got to kill it Saturday, because by the time Sunday rolls around, it's going to be crunchy in that fridge. It's going to start absorbing all the odors of everything else in the fridge. You're going to have your sweet potatoes are going to start tasting like broccoli and things. You just don't want it by Sunday. By Sunday, you've had all the Thanksgiving riches and festivities you can take. So I've been doing my part today to finish off ours. So I will be just drinking on this video, not eating, unless somehow food magically appears next to me at my desk. All right, getting back to the Spurs. They had Leonard in place, contended in 17 and 8. I was going to have those numbers for you, but again, no prep this time around. Sorry. Leonard, of course, as you know. Well, let's go. Well, in 2018, Greg Popovich lost his wife. And just based upon reaction from different people connected to the team, people like PJ Carlesimo and different players, it was not just a loss that he felt. And I'd be lying if I knew how connected she was to the team and what exactly role she played for the team. But she played enough of a role, obviously. Whatever effect she had on Pop, whatever. I don't know if she had. I just don't know. I haven't been able to find this out. If she had a job in the organization, she was her loss was felt. And Popovich left the team as you might imagine, because she died like right. It was either right before the playoffs or right after Game 1, if I remember correctly, of the 2018 playoffs against my Warriors. And he left the team and didn't come back. And the Spurs, obviously, I believe it was a sweep. It was either a sweep or a 4-game loss to the Warriors that year in the first round. And they haven't been the same since. Flirting with the bottom of the standings, more or less. And this year, they came into tonight. Actually, they came into the Chase Center to face my Warriors on a 10-game losing streak. But what do you know? They put up quite a fight. They fell behind by 18 points. Fell behind again later on. I think it was by 16 points. Managed to cut both those leads down to, well, one lead was cut down to 4, and one other time they actually took the lead back. So this team with Keldon Johnson, of course, big Victor Wembanyama, Devin Vassal's playing some good ball. Pop is still there in year 25 coaching the Spurs. And Pop got into it with the fans the other night. Kawhi Leonard was back in town against the Clippers, and he was trying to, with the Clippers against the Spurs, and he was trying to shoot free throws, and the crowd wasn't letting them do it. The crowd was booing him mercilessly. They haven't forgiven him for his trade demand, which I'm about to get to. Pop laid into them, told them basically in his own way to shut the hell up. Now, granted, most of them did not, but just the fact that even some of them did just goes to show you the hold that he still holds over that area, that city. How respected he is down there. That they even listen to him. That even some of them listen to him. How many coaches would? I don't think if Kerr told anyone in Oakland, Steve Kerr told anyone in San Francisco to shut up because Jordan Poole's going to shoot free throws, I don't think anyone would listen. I really don't. I think if anything else, they would probably cheer. Well, I guess it would depend on the Warriors' record at the time. If the team was playing well, they might listen to him, but can't say they probably wouldn't if they weren't. Anyway, getting back to Leonard, as you know, Kawhi Leonard got into a tiff, I guess you want to call it, during that 2017-2018 season with the Spurs medical team. He played 9 games, suffered some kind of quad injury. It didn't heal the way it was supposed to, something like that. And then you may have heard Tony Parker called him out in the locker room in front of everybody, basically said, hey, my quad was worse than yours, and I came back quicker than you are. And by then, with a guy like Leonard, forget it. He's a guy like Leonard. He's not gonna. He doesn't deal with much BS. If you hey, you're basically saying, I'm not needed. I'm not a man. I'm not tough enough for this team. All right, let's see how you do without me for the rest of the season. And Pop tried to smooth over with him. Didn't work. They're on good terms now, as far as I can tell. I mean, they hug each other when they see each other. And if you got Pop standing up for him in front of the crowd of people, even though it was more to help the Spurs than anything else, because you didn't want to wake the beast, as Pop said. But in any event, the Spurs lost their superstar, who was supposed to carry them into the 2020s. They lost him in the summer of 2018, way before they expected to. He goes to the Raptors via trade for DeMar DeRozan, as you know, and won a championship with Toronto. Probably cemented his Hall of Fame legacy with that championship, and left the Spurs. And DeRozan stayed another 3 years with the Spurs, I want to say, and then went on to the Bulls. And since then, the Spurs have been in the toilet. They're in the toilet now. But like I said, they took it to the Warriors. Well, they didn't take it to the Warriors, but they gave the Warriors everything they could want tonight, in spite of being 10 games on the down streak, in spite of not having any realistic hope of winning anything at any point this year other than maybe 20 more games like they did that year they tanked. Now, Wembanyama, I thought he was going to be this year's version of Duncan and turn the Spurs around instantly, but it hasn't happened that way. Now, granted, these Spurs do not have the supporting cast that Tim Duncan Spurs did. Tim Duncan had David Robinson alongside him. You weren't going to lose a lot of games with that Duncan Robinson combo. back in 97, 98. So Wembanyama does not have a second superstar. He has a bunch of good little players. Keldon Johnson is a good player, scored a little bit. Vass has come along. He's up around like 19, 20 points a game. But these are not guys you're going to build a team around. These are not anchors, and it's showing in the standings. I don't know how much more Pop has left, but he's got his hands full if he's going to try to win with this team. But the more pressing issue is that Golden State let them back into the game twice. My Warriors twice let this weak Spurs team whittle big leads down to, well, at one point where it went away completely, and the other point where they were almost there late in the game, turning the ball over 23 times. Although the last one, if replay was still around. I did not know they got rid of the 2-minute replay. Used to be, in the last few years, the refs could, if there was any confusion, any chance that they missed a call on out of bounds or a possession type sort of situation, they could review it on their own. Apparently that has gone away. I did not know that. This must have been like a concession they made in order to give the coaches their second challenge. The buy one get one challenge. Or you're successful on your first challenge, you get a second challenge. And I'm guessing that's a concession they made because you can't have all that and ref replay it as well, because the game's just the game already stops too much as it is with all the fouls being called. And I guess that's the problem is always going to be, do you let them play? When is the cutoff point as far as letting them play? Because at the one point, at the one hand, if guy's fouled, he deserves to shoot free throws. If guy's fouled, he deserves to be rewarded for it by his team keeping the ball, or him going to the line, something like that, or the other team going into the bonus. You can't just ignore fouls. But on the other hand, when you draw the line, when do fouls become the focus? When you have them happening every 15, 20 seconds, it's like penalties in NFL, right? People argue, and it's probably true on some level, there's holding on every play in the NFL, on every play. If the officials wanted to, they could probably call holding on every single down. Someone's doing it, but thankfully they don't call that, because who'd want to watch a game like that? Who'd want to play in a game like that? I'd rather take the holding, just call one per possession, max, and only then if it's egregious. I could live with that if the other guy's like being subtle about it. I could live with it as a fan and as if I were on the field. I guess I could live with it. But you don't want a game that just gets bogged down in fouls. And when you have that happen, bogged down in fouls, bogged down in replays, what happens is what happened tonight. You get like the Spurs got a gift possession towards the end of the game when Gary Payton dribbled the ball off what the ref said was his own foot, when it was the foot of one of the Spurs. Possession goes incorrectly back to the Spurs, who at that time I think were down by 4 points and making a run because Golden State just could not keep their hands. They could not hold the possession. They were being very sloppy down the stretch, very troubling. And in the season where their turnovers have overall been down, thank you, Chris Paul, shout out, way to bring those numbers down, because turnovers has always been a problem for the Warriors. And I remember one game where he's been rough with his turnovers out of all the games this season. Other than that, he's been real stingy about giving up those possessions, and we're thankful for that. It's showing in the numbers. It's not showing in the win column, but I hate to see where we'd be at without Paul's influence on those turnovers. Golden State in the end, though, luckily Stephen Curry is a member of this team still getting it done, still balling at age 35, putting the ball in the basket almost at will, and he carried him down the stretch again tonight. We got a couple of good looks, good baskets from Dario Saric. He had 20 points tonight for the Warriors, and they walked away with the victory. However, my Warriors, the champions in 21-22, are only 8-9, 10th place in the Western Conference, a play-in team at best if the playoffs started today. And speaking of things going on today, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to lie to you. I could not care. This didn't start today, but it's just going on today. This is like completes the first week of it. I could not care any less about this in-season tournament. Mainly because I'm not one of the people who's going to stand a reward from it financially, like the players on the court playing will. But when you just introduced the play-in games, which I think is also called a play-in tournament, when you just introduced that a couple years ago, and you still have people out there, not me, because I forced myself to figure out how the thing worked. When you have a play-in tournament that's new to the sport, that people are still trying to understand, because I have friends who follow basketball. They don't follow as closely as I do, but they're fans. They're fans enough to where they know, they thought they knew how things worked. The top 8 teams in each conference make the playoffs. But that's only true after this play-in tournament now, since I think 2020. Now we have an extra 2 teams who are trying to compete with the bottom 2 teams of the top 8 to get in the playoffs. And that enough, that should have been the only major change to the scheduling, to the games, to the competition. That should be the only tournament in effect right now. But what they did, and apparently this has been some time coming, I'm not going to pretend I know a whole lot about it because I just don't care. But this in-season tournament, which is supposed to be something like, what is it, 4 game rounds or whatever it is for each team, and then you just break down until there's like a champion and you win the NBA Cup. This is all during the season. These are all regular season games that count. I don't know why you'd even want to do this. Well, I know as a player you'd want to do it to get extra money, which is what they're getting. So they don't have to play any extra games. They don't have to play any extra minutes. So they're allowing this to happen, and what it's doing is, at least for fans like me, it's just a big distraction. It's just a big unnecessary distraction. It's the courts, and I remember the first night that I saw a in-season tournament game, which was obviously about 6 days ago, maybe a week, and the court was all funky looking and funky painted, and I thought, this can't possibly be how they're going to do things. Why do they have their arena looking like that? Then I was reminded, oh yeah, the tournament starts tonight. I heard a little bit about this, yeah. But see, when you don't care about something, and they introduce it to you, and they make you want to watch something else because you're all confused. You don't understand what's happening. You don't care. I don't care about the tournament. I don't care about this tournament. But it's here. It doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks, except for the people who run the NBA and the people playing the games. And even some players, and these are players who are going to benefit financially from this tournament, they don't even understand how exactly it works. They just go out and play, which I guess is probably for the best. If you're going to get paid just for doing what you would be doing anyway, and you have a chance to get paid extra, I wouldn't ask them any questions either. I remember Shaquille O'Neal in his first book, and this is advice that I take to this day. I read that book like in 2000 when it came out. He said that he does not fill his head with more information than what's necessary. If it's something that he doesn't need to know right now and won't need to know in a pinch, he writes it down, sticks it off to the side somewhere where he can access it later, or he has a guy handle it, one of his people, one of his agent or his financial guy or his property guy or whoever. He does not fill his head with unnecessary clutter. Now, don't make any jokes about Shaq's intelligence. Shaq is a very smart guy. This is just about, why are you going to memorize all your bank account numbers? Why are you going to memorize all your passwords and things when you don't have to? When you need your head to be as clear as possible to do your job, right? So I guess there's some logic to that. And to this day, I make sure I write down, and don't go looking for it because you won't find it. I write down my key information somewhere where only I, or maybe my daughter, or maybe my mother would be able to find it in an emergency. And or certain close friends of mine. And these are things I don't want cluttering up my head. I need my head clear so I can deliver this earth-shattering sports content to you, which you cannot live without, obviously. If my head's full of clutter that has nothing to do with anything, I can't tell you about things like the NBA season tournament and how little I care about it. Right? Well, the courts are just so ugly. And I like the Hive where the Hornets play. I know they don't call it that anymore, but that's the one court in the NBA where I liked the different design, where they actually had it looking like a beehive or a hornet hive, I guess I should say. Where they actually painted the design, the lane looked different. There was all colors, on inside the 3 point line. It looked different than every other court. It wasn't just the paint in a lane. It wasn't just brown wood everywhere. They actually had color, some life to it, some a pattern, a design. And that's the only court that I can think of off the top of my head I've ever liked seeing look anything but standard. Maybe that makes me a boring guy. Hey, maybe it does. And if it does, then there's a lot of boring guys like me, because if you go on Twitter, nobody likes the way these courts look. I haven't seen anyone praising any of the appearances of these courts. And I'm not coming out in the NBA for it. You need some way to reflect that this game is different, that this game is special, that this game counts for something more than just a regular season W, right? Or a regular season loss. Just they need to dial it back a little. Just paint the inside of the 3 point line. You don't have to paint the whole court. You really don't. It's not appealing. In a world where you got all the uniforms, the 50 million different uniforms, you got to keep track of. It's just more than what I think is necessary. Okay, so that's my 2 cents on the NBA in-season tournament. And before I transition to the NFL, I do have to talk about two other NBA stories. One is a story. One is an awful story. Well, I guess in a way they're both awful. And this is, I haven't spoken to you guys one-on-one in probably about a month now, so I'm a little behind on some things, but there's just a couple things I want to talk about. Speaking of the Hornets, Miles Bridges came back, I think it was last week or the week before, came back from his suspension for two different violations, two different crimes he committed. One being assaulting the mother of his children, and the other being, let's see if I remember this correctly. I believe he was damaging her property. He came out there with an object or something like that. It was something along those lines. It was bad, and this is why I should have done some show prep, but I didn't do any show prep, so bear with me. Miles Bridges did some pretty heinous things in this last year. Got himself suspended, got himself kicked out of the league. Well, not kicked out of the league, but he was out of the league last year because the Hornets wouldn't touch him. And then when he got re-signed by the Hornets, the NBA dropped their suspension on him, credited him with some time served. I believe he had to serve 20 games total out of the 30 he was originally supposed. They credited him for 10, if I have my facts right. But he came back finally. He's a very good player, put up some very good numbers before all this happened. But it's just hard for me to reconcile. And this is the part of sports, and I'm not naive enough to think that everyone in sports is a Boy Scout. This isn't Little League. These are grown men, young men, but grown men. And it's just hard for me to reconcile how someone who is capable of these things can be just welcomed back into a locker room, no matter how good he is, how tight you were before. And maybe it's because, and I know, and this is one of my flaws, is that I'm pretty loyal to most of my friends that I've had in my life. I have had to let some go over the years. I think we all do at some point for whatever reason. Never for any reasons like Miles Bridges, but I do know that even for my closest of friends, if I were to find out they were up to this type of behavior, they were physically harming women, physically putting children in harm's way, loyal as I am to my friends, it would be very hard for me to continue that friendship. Because, well, I have a child for one, and you want to hold the people in your life when you are a parent to a higher standard than you might have otherwise. If it's just me, hey, let's kick it, let's go drink. But also at the same time, you don't want to sit here and, because this is a phrase that I learned from my family very early on. You're as good as the company that you keep. And I remember someone I know once was accused of doing drugs because they were hanging out with people who were doing drugs. And this person denied to me up and down that they were doing drugs. And I wanted to believe him, but it was very hard to, because, well, you are as good as the company you keep. And lo and behold, I found out they were doing drugs just as bad as the other people were, if not worse. And so I've carried that with me to this day. So it would be very hard to keep that person in my life. Now, if you're a teammate of Miles Bridges and you've gone to work with him every day and you know him and you know what kind of person that he's at least shown to you, that, hey, I'm not a bad person, I just did a couple of really bad things. And I hope that's all it is. And I hope this isn't the case of them just brushing aside and not being courageous enough to take a stand against someone who's done some pretty heinous things because he can score a basketball and because you want to win basketball games. Miles Bridges' talent should never, ever come ahead of Miles Bridges' character. And I do believe in second chance up to a point. He got a second chance, and he blew that too. Right? He had 2 incidents with this woman. And the second one put the kids in danger. I really wish I had researched exactly what it was. It was bad. Look it up yourselves. Brace yourself when you do. It's not pretty. He deserved to be in jail. I don't think if he did go to jail, it wasn't for long. But he's back now. And if I go to a Warriors game that he plays against them, I will boo the living crap out of him. Because I don't approve of that. And yes, Miles Bridges probably has more money in his shoe than I've made in my life. I don't give a crap. Money to me doesn't buy respect. And that is a person who is a long, long, long way from ever earning my respect for anything. And the other topic I want to bring up from the NBA is just as bad. It's Josh Giddey. He's under investigation. And he's under investigation because he supposedly, this just came out today. Actually, I heard it on, I saw it on TikTok last night. It just came out on more credible sources today, Friday, that Josh Giddey was doing yucky stuff with an underage girl. And then attached to like an Instagram post or whatever was a photo of him with this girl. I don't know if there's video or not. Because I'm not trying to see it if there is. No. That's yucky. Like I said, I have a kid. And even if I didn't have a kid, that would still be just disgusting to even accidentally stumble upon. So I didn't even risk clicking on anything. But all I want to say is, if there's a crime that's worse than what Miles Bridges did, Josh Giddey, if he's guilty of it, is right up there with him, times 10. That's just nasty. I'm not going to go to a long rant because it's late at night. But what I will say is, I talked about this earlier this year when the allegations against Wander Franco of the Tampa Bay Rays with underage girl came out, and they were pretty much, there wasn't much room for error. It all signs pointed to him being guilty. And now this is very early in the Giddey investigation. I'm not going to say he's guilty yet, but if he is guilty, I don't want to see this mofo in the league ever again. By the way, he is a point guard for the Thunder. I think this is his 3rd or 4th year. If he's found to be guilty of these crimes, if he's proven to have messed around with this girl or any boy or anyone who's underage, who is a minor, and he shouldn't be, I want the book thrown at him. I want him in jail too. I don't care how good he is at dribbling a basketball. I don't care how good he is at shooting a basketball. He's got to go. That's just messing with the kids like that is not something I have any patience for whatsoever. I'm going to stop right there. And we're going to transition to the NFL. NFL, something, tonight we had the Dolphins playing the Jets. I think this is the first ever Black Friday NFL game that they were talking about this happening this year. I had forgotten about it until I turned on the TV and there it was. So yeah, Dolphins versus Jets. Dolphins came out on top. They're 7-3 now. The Jets continue to stumble. And with each loss, it's becoming less and less likely that Aaron Rodgers is going to come back to the field this season. He has said that his return to the field this season depended on, of course, if his leg allowed him to. Remember, he tore his Achilles back in week 1. But also on where the Jets were in the standings. If the Jets are going to be 4-7, I believe they're 4-7 now, and they're not going to make a serious run of the playoffs, they'd have to get red hot starting next week to even be at 500, right, to even have a hope. So I think this loss probably sealed any real chance of Rodgers if he stays true to his word coming back. And that's really too bad because his recovery, the time he's put in from that Achilles injury, everything he's done, because you've seen the video that he posted video himself jogging. He's set to attend practice here pretty soon for the Jets. This is pretty close to miraculous for a man his age to recover this quickly from such a serious injury, right? And if you listened to me, Skillz on Sports before, or the Sophie show, you know that I'm not a big Rodgers guy. The guy's a weirdo most of the time. He likes attention. He likes screwing around with people because it amuses him. His whole thing with his family, I'm not, that's kind of like, and I know that not all family is, hunky-dory and hugs and kisses and everything like that, but it's just kind of weird. Everything that goes on with him and his relationships, there's something about the guy that just puts me off. But I must say, I respect the hell out of him for working so hard to get back to the field for this Jets team that desperately needs him. Pushed Zach Wilson to quarterback 3 status earlier this week. Zach Wilson was the replacement for Rodgers and Rodgers' predecessor the last couple of years with the Jets. But Zach Wilson, he's just not NFL starting quarterback material. I can't remember if I've ever seen him succeed for more than a couple series at a time. He's just not the answer. Rodgers probably isn't going to get the Jets to a Super Bowl either, but at least they'd be respectable. At least they'd contend. And, of course, that was the plan. That's the whole reason they got him in the first place. No one knew he was going to tear his Achilles in the middle of the first quarter of the first game. That's what happened. But I respect the hell out of him for working so hard in his rehab, doing everything he has to do. And not only that, I respect him for also being visible, being vocal. He's still a member of this team. It's like he's really taking being a New York Jet seriously, which is not what I expected when he got traded there. I did not think he was going to take being a New York Jet seriously at all whatsoever. I thought he was just going to roll in, maybe go on average complete 15 of 25 passes a night for 150 yards. Just play out the string and collect a big fat paycheck while he did so. But no, he's taking his role as a future Hall of Famer on this team seriously. He's done tons of interviews. He's always accessible with his rehab, with his whatever's going on with the team. He speaks up. He's spoken up in defense of Zach Wilson, even trying to rally up support for that guy, even though he doesn't really deserve it based on his play. And while I won't say I look at Rodgers in a whole new light, I will say that I do not completely look at him now with the lights off. And that's my thoughts on Aaron Rodgers. Speaking of torn Achilles, the Dolphins linebacker Jalen Phillips suffered an Achilles tear tonight. There was also an ejection tonight too, which I was going to talk about, but we'll say that for another time. Jalen Phillips was about to it was a non-contact play. He was just running across the line of scrimmage, about to do what he does, and he went down. And here's the thing about Achilles injuries. Now, if you know what happens when the Achilles tears, that tendon is behind your calf, and if you're watching, especially if you're watching in slow motion or if you're watching Zoom, you can oftentimes see that Achilles at the bottom of the leg roll up the leg, because that's what happens when it snaps. It starts there and just rolls up, almost like a curtain. You pull a curtain down and it snaps back up into place. The old school curtain, or curtain. I'm thinking of curtain, drape, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. You didn't even need, for Jalen Phillips' Achilles injury tonight, you didn't even need to slow it down. You didn't need to pause. You didn't need to zoom in. If you just replay it, because obviously your eye's not going to be on Phillips probably if you're just watching live, but once you see he's hurt, you replay it at normal speed, and you can actually see in real time. And I'm not saying this to make it look, hey, let's go on YouTube and find the injury. It's gonna be so much fun to watch. Let's watch the guy's Achilles tear. I'm not telling you that for that reason. I'm just telling you that because you can actually see it pop with him running at regular speed on the replay. You can see the little explosion in the sock. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Because, they talk about with Achilles tears. Or, sorry, with ACL tears. When you have a clean ACL tear, like my 49ers safety Tuwala Hufanga suffered a couple games ago, clean tear of the ACL is the best one to have. It heals best that way. He might be back in 9 months if he's lucky, and pushes him, and goes hard on rehab. I don't know if for the Achilles tendon it matters how you tear it or not, whether or not that's going to speed up the recovery or make it an easy recovery. All I know is that you could actually look in his sock. If you know what's coming, you look in his sock and you could actually see the back of his leg kind of pop out a little bit, like something blew up in his sock. And I don't know if that's a worse thing, that it was so clear to see in real time. I hope not. Jalen Phillips is a good young player from everything I've heard. I haven't watched a whole lot of him. He was in tears, as you might imagine. His whole team rallied around him. It was quite a scene to watch him get carted off. He's got a long road ahead of him, but hopefully he's able to come back just as good as he was. He's a young guy. As far as I was going to look up his age. I know he's a younger guy, but God bless him. God help him recover and get his career back on track where he needs to be. No one wants to see anyone get hurt, and that's my 49ers this year have been so blessed that up until Hufanga's injury a couple games ago, they have not had anyone go down for any real length of time. Debo missed a few games, missed 3 games, I think. Trent Williams missed a couple games with the ankle. They got rolled on. But other than that, we have been blessed with great health. Health so great, in fact, that we we felt confident enough that in the game we led, I say we like I'm on the team, that in the game the 49ers led by 30-something points, that they felt confident enough to run Christian McCaffrey back out on the field late in the game to try to get the record-breaking 18th touchdown in a consecutive regular season game. 18 would have broken the record that he had tied with Hall of Famer Lenny Moore. 17 apiece. Now, McCaffrey gone that whole game without scoring, but this is against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The game was decided. Coach Kyle Shanahan sends him back out late in the fourth quarter, give him a shot. And where they went wrong, I'll tell you exactly what they should have done. McCaffrey should have been a decoy for the first couple plays, if for no other reason than to protect him, right? What you do, you run a slant to somebody, just get 3-4 yards closer, because this was out by like the 10-yard line somewhere. He was like 10 yards short of the end zone when they started giving him the ball. You use someone else to get him closer. I don't know why Jacksonville just didn't pile. They didn't have all eyes just on McCaffrey the whole time. They should have had 10 guys on McCaffrey and maybe 1 guy on Debo. Or who was it? Juwan Jennings probably was in by that point. But you get my point, right? But Kyle gave Christian the ball 4 times on that possession. Felt so confident no one was going to get hurt. And he explained later on to Greg Papa, the same Greg Papa I mentioned earlier, who's the 49ers play-by-play voice on the radio. He explained later on that his reasoning was, hey, Christian McCaffrey's carried the ball 200 times plus this year without getting hurt. And the only time he got hurt this year was when he didn't have the ball. It was a non-contact, which is true. So when you use that kind of logic, I guess, it's sort of hard to argue what he was thinking. McCaffrey got the ball 4 times. I think he got down to the 3 or the 2 yard line. Did not get really close to getting in. Did not get hurt, more importantly. Didn't break the record. And it was funny because they're teasing Kyle Juszczyk, who had a touchdown, I think the series before, on a short pass to the goal line. Why didn't Juszczyk go down? I don't know about Kyle Juszczyk's contract, but I'm pretty sure if he scores a touchdown, an NFL touchdown, you are trained to get in the end zone. Remember that play with Todd Gurley a few years ago when he was with the Falcons that one year, when he was supposed to get inside the 5 yard line and go down so that the Falcons could like burn up some time and then maybe go for the game-winning field goal or something like that, or something where he was not supposed to score so quickly and give the ball back to the opponent. But because every NFL player is trained, once they see that goal line, if Pater is within reach, go for it. You're not trained I bet you even right after, if you're told right before you go on the field, don't score, we'd rather chew up the time than actually have the points. I'm pretty sure that even more than half the league would still be conditioned to go in that end zone. Because what Gurley ended up doing, he ran full speed. He had a clear path to the goal. And right at the last minute, as he's about to cross the goal, he realized, oh, shoot, I got to get down because we need to use up more clock or try to kick a field goal on fourth down or something. And he ends up like kind of turning his body horizontally at the goal line. By then, it was too late. He was already in. And Atlanta got the points, which in 99% of the situations would be a good thing, but not in this situation. I do not remember how that turned out, if that ended up costing Atlanta that game or anything went awry after that. I should have looked it up, but I did not, because as I said, no prep. And actually, this is Skillz on Sports, back with you. I actually had some technical difficulty. You may have noticed the screen just jumped a few seconds, maybe about a minute ago. The screen jumped a little bit. We had some technical difficulty, and for a moment, I thought I didn't have this entire video I just made for you. I thought I had lost the whole thing. But luckily, through happenstance, it turned up somewhere on my hard drive where it should not have been. We are back in business. I didn't have to do this whole show all over again, which is good because I feel like I gave you, maybe not gold this time around, but at least platinum. Yeah, is platinum better than gold? I don't know. I gave you something you can use. Silver. Let's go with silver. There. Bronze. No worse than bronze, definitely. This is certainly not one of my worst performances. Probably not my best, even though I may look a little sleepy as I'm looking at myself on the screen here. But I digress. Moving on. Other NFL news going on. We had another. I mentioned the injury to Jalen Williams and his Achilles. The turf in New York is again coming under fire. That's where he got hurt, in the Meadowlands. And it could be just time, if for no other reason, to just shut everyone up to do something about that turf. I don't see it happening, but I mean they supposedly done tests where, oh no, there's no greater rate of injury on this field than there is on any other turf field in the NFL. And whether or not that's true, hey, I'm not about to do the research for that. We just want to see the players out there who we pay to see, who we tune in to see, healthy. We've had, and every year you're going to have star players go down. We've had our share of star players go down this year. Rodgers is one of them. Still waiting on Von Miller to get back from his injury from last season. We just lost Kirk Cousins to an Achilles injury. The list goes on and on. Daniel Jones is out. I believe he had, was it ankle or Achilles with him? I forgot. So we just want to see our players play. Is that so wrong? And is it so wrong to expect the fields they play on to be easier on them rather than harder in a game that's already as hard as you can possibly get to play, as tough as you can have a game be? Football is that sport. You're getting hit, and you don't need the ground to be your enemy as well. You don't need your ground to be the 12th man. Do I have to pay royalties to that college for using the 12th man? I hope not, because I don't have any. But yeah, you get the point I'm making. We got about 10 minutes left in the show. I got a little bit of baseball stuff I want to talk about, and then we're going to get to our regular feature, which is Skillz on Pills. Yeah. Supposed to do it earlier, but I forgot. Baseball news, not a ton of it. Ron Washington is back as manager of the California Angels, or what do they call now? Los Angeles Angels. Ron Washington is managing the Angels. He has been out of the game as a manager anyway for a long time now. But you remember, Rangers were the world champions this year under Bruce Bochy. It was Ron Washington who got them to their first two World Series back-to-back in 2010, 2011, losing to Bruce Bochy, ironically. Coming within a strike 2 different times of winning in 2011 over the Cardinals. But, David Freese had to go and botch all that. So, made Tony La Russa's resume look sweeter, hurt the Rangers, kept them from being champions until about a month ago. So, kudos to Ron Washington. No one's ever said a bad word about him except for his 1989 Don Russ baseball card, which, if you haven't seen it, let's just say it's not very flattering to the poor guy. I don't personally have it because I haven't collected Don Russ since I was a kid, but I've seen it, I've held it, and yeah, if you're not prepared for it, it's not, like I said, a very flattering picture of Ron. And God bless him that he's able to turn that negative around and have a great career as a coach and a manager. Everyone respects Ron Washington. Jason Giambi gave him his gold glove, I think. I think outright just gave it to him. One of the gold gloves he won when he was still with the A's. Washington was his coach. And that's something. So good luck to Ron down in LA. We need a little bit more color in our managerial hires. And we lost Dusty, but at least we gained Ron. So there we go. To balance that out. Let's try to get some more in there if possible. It doesn't hurt to have a little bit of diversity, right? I mean, I'm not one of those people, trust me, but a little diversity is not a bad thing. We don't want just one or two brothers running the show in a sport where there's already so few brothers as it is. We have other news. Aaron Nola signed a $172 million deal to stay with the Philadelphia Phillies. And I just want to say, before I went on the air today, I checked out Aaron Nola's career stats, and never in my life have I been less impressed with as many 200 strikeout seasons as Aaron Nola has had. I've never seen one guy have so many 200 strikeout seasons and not be impressed by it at all. It's just the era we're in. Every batter strikes out 200 times. If you're a pitcher who's worth anything, you can get at least 180, right? If you're allowed to pitch long enough to do that in a game, over the course of a season. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Aaron Nola. He's been a very good pitcher for a long time, but he's been up and down these last 3 years. And I'll give him this. The man takes the ball. He hasn't missed a start. He hasn't been on the injured list since 2017. He takes that ball. He gives you innings. He made all 32. He made 32 starts exactly for 3 straight years. But his other numbers, his ERA is not what you would expect from a guy who just got paid $172 million. It's a little high. It was 446 last year. It was 463 in 2021. He brought it down to 320 something last season, and I think he was 4th in Cy Young voting last season. So he's kind of getting paid off of that a little bit. That being said, Nola had a stretch last year. He had like a 20 start stretch where his ERA was 3.69, and in his other starts, he was having trouble even getting through the 5th inning. And so it's just a matter of, hey, which guy are you going to get? Now the Phillies are banking on him being the guy he's been. He's been at different times. He's been their ace. At other times he's been a guy he had 3 starts in a row last year where he didn't complete 5 innings. And hey, I believe his stuff is there. He's still striking out a ton of guys, which doesn't really mean as much as it once did, as I said, but the fact is he's still out there. He's taking the ball. There's something to be said about taking the ball, durability. I wish the guy the best. I wish him the best. Anybody who wants to go out there and pitch, and he's a good pitcher. He's got great stuff. Hopefully, and this is for 7 years, by the way. 7 years, $172 million for the Philadelphia Phillies, who continue to go in their pocketbooks and try to keep that team near the top of the standings, where they've been the last couple of years. In the World Series, year before last, of course, losing to the I'm drawing a total blank. Houston Astros, yeah. Duh. All right. Now we're going to close this segment. We're going to close Skillz on Sports this week with my segment, Skillz on Pills. I am on blood pressure medication, and part of the reason why my blood pressure is so high is because things in the sports world annoy me. And what I'm annoyed with right now, I'm grateful on the one hand, but I'm also annoyed on the other hand with Fanatics. And as you may or may not know, Fanatics is the company that took over Topps Baseball Company, right? Topps lost their licensing rights for baseball. Fanatics bought it, or they were about to lose the rights. Fanatics claimed that right, and they ended up just buying the whole Topps company altogether. Now, since then, at least I have, me and other collectors, because I have a network of people I network with on Twitter, and we discuss things going on with the company, and we point out things. Fanatics has not been on the up and up with some of the stuff it's selling with its customers. They've been offering one deal and giving another. They've been changing the rules at the last minute. They've made it difficult to get refunds where refunds are due to certain customers. They haven't been doing things the right way. And what my beef with them is, every year since the internet has existed, Topps has released their design for the following year's set. The flagship set comes out no later than August, as far back as I can remember. Around no later than August, sometime in the mid to late summer, you get to know what the next year's Topps baseball set design is going to be. It's right there on the Topps website. It's right there on Topps Twitter page. Ever since Twitter's been around, Topps has tweeted it out early. Other companies get their copy, other card websites, things like that. It's known. It's easy to find. It's just something we look forward to as collectors. But in that lull between the time Series 2 is released, which is usually around like early June, and until the update series comes out in October. So far, we are now a few days away from December, and there is still no release of the 2024 Topps flagship design anywhere. Not from Fanatics, not from Topps website, not from anywhere, anyone. And not only that, they have not released any reason as to why, not give us a date as to when it may be released. We don't know. And so, me as a collector, I'm fearing the worst. Is there going to be a 2024 Topps flagship? This company's under new ownership. Maybe they want to do things differently. Maybe they don't want to push a flagship set out that's probably the least valuable overall out of all the things that they released. Because Topps doesn't just release back when I first started collecting, it was always just Topps and Topps Traded. Now you have Topps Heritage, you have Topps Chrome, Topps Finest, and the Topps was it Allen Ginter special set that they do. There's all kinds of releases, and this is even after MLBPA came down on them and told them to cut back on releases. There'd be even more. So I can't help but wonder and be concerned. A, is there going to be a flagship set next year? Or B, if there is, when are we going to know anything about it? Or how late is it going to be released? April, May? What's going on? Change is inevitable in life. I know that. And I'm grateful that Fanatics came along and bought the company rather than just let that baseball license expire and create some new company, lose all that history with Topps that so many people like me have. But, give us something. You cannot just run behind a rock and hide, just not say anything. There's never been a company in the history of companies where anyone has said, boy, I'm glad they didn't release that information so early. I'm glad I didn't know when my favorite product was coming out. I'm so glad they're just secretive about everything and they're not transparent whatsoever about what's going on. This new company that just bought my favorite company, they're doing everything perfectly by just being secretive and hush-hush and cheating customers too while they're at it. So Fanatics is my Skillz on Sports blood pressure subject of this week's, or I say week like I do this every week, this segment and this show, okay? Get your stuff together, Fanatics. I'm probably still going to buy your set even no matter when you release it, but I'm not going to be happy about it. Instead of smiling like this, I'm going to be smiling like this. Okay? Ball's in your court. Pun intended. That's going to do it for this edition of Skillz on Sports. We are headed towards a full football Sunday coming up. Unfortunately, my Niners do not play. They just play on Thursday, as I've discussed earlier. So I'm not going to be as invested in the games as I might normally be. But hey, football is football. I love me some football season. We're already in the week, what is this, week 12, I want to say? So, hey, go Niners next weekend. And go any other teams that stand a chance of helping them in the standings this weekend. My Niners are tied for the second best record in the NFL. So they don't need a ton of help, but any help they can get will help. I am your boy Skillz. It is good to be back with you. Things will be a little bit more cleaned up next time I'm with you because I'm actually going to prep for the show. And I'm not going to have technical difficulties, all right? I will not let that happen. Stay hungry, stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.